Hello, my name's Scott Bell and I'm the co-production and community engagement worker for Wi-Fi. And I'm going to give you a little beginner's guide journey through co-production. I'm going to do this in two parts. One, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences of co-production and my experiences as a service user and my journey into professional. And I'm also then going to give a little presentation about how we co-produce Wi-Fi to make it a bit more specific and to give you a few more ideas. I will also include some paperwork, some top tips for co-production, how to support co-production, and some stuff that I wrote that seems to have influenced how co-production is worked through our partnership. Just for context, I want to tell you a little bit about Wi-Fi before I start. Wi-Fi stands for West Yorkshire Finding Independence, and it's a big lottery funded project set up to navigate into services 1,050 of the most entrenched, disengaged, disenfranchised people that live in West Yorkshire. Also, a secondary part of the programme is the system change element. So we are a programme of change that is there to inform and promote different ways of working across services across West Yorkshire. I guess to give you a bit of a background about myself before we move on, I've spent a lot of years in prison. You know, I am one of the experts by experience that then became employed on the programme, and that experience, expert experience, includes years and years of addiction, some low-level and high-level mental health conditions at times, and lots and lots of homelessness. I used a lot of drugs from about 13, 14-year-old. And like as is a common story, I found that I started off with cannabis, then amphetamines, and my drug use over the years spiralled from, I guess, weekend use to Thursday to Monday to pretty much day in, day out, day in, day out. I've lost careers, I've lost marriages, I've lost houses through my drug use, and I just came to a point a few years ago where the loss was far outweighing anything tangible. And I woke up one morning and I thought, you're living in a bedsit, Scott, you've got no money, you've lost the bottle to go out and commit any crime or to do anything that's going to earn you money and pay for this drug habit. And I pretty much knew that I was on my knees, and that if I carried on, it was a long time in prison or my death or in some psychiatric ward somewhere. And that's, I guess, for me, the first day my life changed, or that I started to change my own life. It wasn't all plain sailing from there, don't get me wrong. I was on, at that time, high doses of methadone, and I guess I came to the decision that I needed, personally, a set amount of time where I could sort out the problems in my life that weren't related to drug use, offending, homelessness, or mental health issues. So I started to build relationships with my family, cut off a lot of friends, and set down a plan with a worker I had at the time that made sense to me. And I guess the plan for me was basically sort my life out. However, I'm saying them words and it sounds simple, but it wasn't simple at the time. Come off the methadone and start to look to build something for the future. And that involved somebody turning around to me one day and saying, have you ever thought about working in the third sector, or more specifically at the time, working to be a drug worker? And it just made so much sense to me, because I have all them years of experience that I'm letting define me at the time. You know, I'm letting it define me in a way that was negative. How about letting it define me for something positive? And that's what I started to do. I started to access training. I took a few knocks along the way, don't get me wrong, but I started to access training, did some volunteering, some peer mentoring, and pretty much a year and a half ago I got my first job in this sector working at probation, and then moved to Wi-Fi 9 months later. Then now the beauty of the Wi-Fi project is it's been part of my journey throughout. I was one of the first expert by experience involved in the programme and the development of the programme, and at that time I was a service user of a disc service. And I kind of stayed involved because I bought into the concept. You know, I would have been somebody that would have needed a Wi-Fi program or a fulfilling lives program at certain points in my life. And I understood it. You know, services set up for people with complex and multiple needs. It kind of seems like today seems like a common sense decision. That sort of so simple to say. Why hasn't it been thought of before? And throughout the development of the program, I kind of grew into, I guess, where I wanted to go. And from that, I was a peer mentor. I helped write some of the job roles. I became staff at probation and stayed a little bit involved when we went to launch. And then when the job roles came, I applied for the job role that pleases me most. It's one of my passions, you know, is how to co-produce a service and how to continually co-produce a service. My life's gone exponential. I think since I've been involved as a paid member of staff on the Wi-Fi programme, I've seen personally what I'm capable of. I've also seen it in other people as well. I've seen experts along the way grow into their own skin. And a lot of that has been around being involved with Wi-Fi, seeing that, you know, I'm not banging on the door saying co-production is the answer, but people that have been involved in it, I've seen move into job roles, I've seen go on living fulfilling lives. And a lot of that's reflected in me. So, for me personally, co-production is collaborative working, and with the ability to take hierarchy and power out of the equation. It's a human thing. You know, it's people meet. If you're designing a project, it's people meeting around the table, valuing Scott as what Scott's good at and what Scott can bring to the table, or the worker, or the manager, or the commissioner. You know, everybody has a part to play in co-production. It's just taking certain preconceived ideals and roles from years gone by and leaving them at the door. I mean, for instance, when I deliver a training event, one of the first things I'll always ask is people take the badges off. And the reason being is because the one thing that a lot of us do is we define ourselves by our job role or our position in life. So when I was a client of Discs, I would sometimes introduce myself as, hello, my name is Scott, I'm an addict. As a worker, I generally now introduce myself as, hello, my name is Scott, I am a co-production and community engagement worker for Wi-Fi. But first and foremost, I'm Scott and I'm a human being. So now we're going to get to the ideas behind co-production and how to co-produce. We've talked a little bit about experience and why experience is important. So I'm now going to talk about how we co-produce Wi-Fi and how we could co-produce a project that provides care in 4 areas and the complexities of homelessness, addiction, reoffending behaviour and mental ill health. There's always a starting point, and the starting point for us were these 6 principles. So before we got into co-producing Wi-Fi, we had to look at what was good co-production, and all good co-production is formed on 6 principles. The first one being, and probably one of the most important, taking an asset-based approach and not pushing people beyond their strengths and capabilities. So me personally, I would not ask anybody to do anything they weren't comfortable with doing or they weren't skilled up to do. The second is building on people's existing capabilities. So if somebody's good at organising and running group work, why would you not let them continually do that and build on that? Reciprocity and mutuality. You know, as services, we sometimes work with service user involvement, and it sometimes feels a bit tokenistic when we're seemingly taking. This has to be a meet in the middle process. So if I'm going to get involved in a project, or if I'm going to get involved in any form of co-production, it has to be a two-way street. The one thing you find that with any good co-production, and also with a lot of service user involvement, is peer support networks build up. And that isn't necessarily just with service users, clients, customers or patients. You know, peer support networks build up around professionals as well as the customers, clients and patients. One of the most important ones for me, and one that challenges a lot of people's ideals about co-production, is blurring distinctions. And the reason that's important is because, one, it takes some of the power out of the situation, and it allows people to meet in the middle. But also, I think distinctions need to be blurred. In the past, we've had good service user involvement policies where it's been run by a service user or a patient or a participant, and no manager's ever come to this service user group. And me personally, with my experience, I always found it more beneficial, more empowering when the service that were running the service user group came in as staff, but came in as people and not as staff members. And the last one is facilitating rather than delivering. As I'll get through to a model later on that, there's a lot of, I guess, there's a connection between delivering and educating, and that sometimes falls under the bracket of doing so rather than doing with. If I'm running the workshop, I'm facilitating the workshop and letting the people in the workshop be part of that workshop rather than me stood there telling them, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. So now we've covered the 6 principles, I want to talk about how we co-produce Wi-Fi to give you a bit of background about how it works in principle and how it works in process. So how did we co-produce a Wi-Fi project? Well, firstly, we enabled a network of experts by experience across West Yorkshire who had lived experience of the harm criteria, that's homelessness, addiction, reoffending behaviour and mental ill health. We designed Wi-Fi listening to and understanding the expert experience of services. So it's more commonly known as experience-based design, and that works on the principles that we don't do what we normally do is here's something that's negative and go try sort it out. What we try to do is, what we tried to, and I think we succeeded in doing, is not only listening to that experience, but we understood the experience and valued the experience because that's important. We also let the experts lead and deliver on the peer research project, which gave the full project research from ground level. So the experts were out there getting questionnaires filled in, engaging with people that were, I guess, some of our future clients, some of our future beneficiaries, and we kind of worked, building on their capabilities of understanding that the experts knew better where to find the people who will fill in the questionnaires and do the parts of research than we as professionals did ourselves. And also the experts were empowered to make big decisions alongside professionals and service providers. A great example of that would be the panel that was set up for deciding who the partners were, designing specific job roles. The navigator job roles were designed and the criteria was matched by, was designed by experts sitting there saying, well, this is what we want, this is what we would have wanted for a worker, this is how we would want a worker to work with us. And some of the underpinning principles that we work with today is that Wi-Fi was co-designed with experts and professionals from across West Yorkshire. It's still continually co-produced with experts and our partners as well as external agencies and services, and co-delivered wherever possible with experts and partners. Because we understand that if you have an expert group that sits outside or outside the project as a whole, it has less impact than it does where when the experts sit within the governance structure. So all levels within Wi-Fi, we are co-producing by having experts sit on the locality meetings, experts that sit and influence the operational managers groups and the strategic stakeholders. And not only that, the experts are involved in as much of the work that goes on here at Wi-Fi. And you can't have co-production without being willing to take a risk and have co-design and co-delivery. And sometimes in certain services, and one of our partners who deliver the peer mentoring project, the co-delivery is massive because the partnership between peer mentor and navigator is vital because that improves engagement, and that was something that we found through the design of the project and the design of the job role. So where did we start? Well, as you can see, that's pretty much what we were given. We were given blank pieces of paper and sat down in a room, and pretty much the only criteria was given: services for homelessness, addiction, reoffending behaviour and mental health. And what were the positives, what were the negatives, what would we like to see from a worker, what was missing from services at the time. And that then went on to inform some of the focus working with professionals and experts. I mean, our regular expert-led focus groups design specific parts of Wi-Fi and still continually go on to inform. So there are pieces of work going on where experts will be the driving force behind it. At the time, we got the questionnaires filled in as part of the peer research. We did a lot of service visits across the country, visiting different services. We went to places like the Brink in Liverpool, visited rehabs in Liverpool, went to gender-specific services, and we all did reports on that, which then went to inform the bigger parts of the programme and the business plan. The peer research, which is an annual project, but initially it was run out across West Yorkshire, and we found the need for, I think, about 3/4 of the 400 or 500 questionnaires that were filled in, showed us and showed the Wi-Fi project that we had a definite need for a complex and multiple needs programs across West Yorkshire. The perfect service, again, like I showed you on the last screen, where somebody came in the room and says, there's a blank piece of paper, tell us what you believe the perfect service would be. The passport, which is going to be a digital and accessible assessment tool, and to improve engagement, because one of the things that came out of the perfect service work and the peer research were that to a number, everybody said that service users were continually filling in the same assessment forms over and over and over again, that were very deficit based, that concentrated on what's wrong, you know, how much drugs have you used, when did you last have your mental health crisis, but also to improve engagement by not having to tell your story over and over and over again. I guess, me personally, the one thing I found was that once when I got out of prison, I think in my first week I had 9 appointments. Having to tell my story 9 times, having to concentrate on why I was in prison, what the problems were, and nobody ever sat down to me within all them appointments and said, what are you good at, Scott? And by the end of that very first week, I guess I'd lived everything that I'd lived before I went to prison. And I guess to improve engagement, you know, that's one of the first tools, is not having somebody repeat and relive, you know, the problems, the issues, the anxieties. And also, one of the most important things for the Wi-Fi program to improve engagement is the navigator and peer mentor partnership. It's important because we're working with some of the most chaotic, most entrenched clients that me personally I've ever seen or come into contact with. People that have lived on the streets for 15, 20 years, endemic drinking, you know, entrenched mental health conditions, people that fall through the gaps between services because there's no service set up for somebody with their needs. And having somebody with lived experience that works in partnership with the navigator improves engagement, gives somebody hope that somebody can change. You know, recovery becomes visible within the programme then and external to the programme. And to evidence the 3 underpinning principles of co-design, co-produce, co-deliver, I'm just going to give a little example. Like I say, the perfect service was a great example of co-design, getting people together in a room, professionals as well as service users and ex-service users at the time, and designing something together. It gives people ownership. And I was sat in some of them rooms, I worked on the design of the programme, and I feel that I have blood, sweat and tears in this programme just through that very process. I feel like a part of me is in that process, in this programme. Co-produce, well, I've mentioned the passport. You know, we continually work towards this passport, we continually work towards the design of it. Experts have been involved, it came out of an expert by experience's mouth. Oh, we need something to sort out this, you know, this barrier to engagement. Thus the idea of the passport was born. So we've done discovery work with experts, we've done discovery work with experts and professionals. We've also got consultants, experts and professionals in the same room to inform how it goes forward. And again, I talked about the navigator and peer mentor partnership. A great example of any form of co-production is actually delivering a service, taking a risk and saying, okay, then you can deliver that part of the service, or you can co-deliver that part of the service. There are places where that may not be possible. I mean, I would not ask an ex-service user who has no experience or no clinical degree or clinical qualification to go start prescribing drugs. However, that does not mean that they can't play a part in the engagement of getting somebody to the point where they need drugs prescribing for any, any addiction issues. Services, we always like a model to follow so we can see what we are actually doing. And I find this one particularly helpful, I think, because it splits up certain parts of service delivery as we have known it, as we continue to know it. So in the bottom part, you've got educating and coercing, which is pretty much telling somebody what they need to do or how they need to do it. Then we've got doing for, informing, consulting, engaging, which is what most services do now as part of their service user involvement policies. You know, informing people on notice boards of meetings, information, text messages are part of informing. Consulting, if it was up to me, I would take this word out of the language. Consultation seems to carry a negative connotation nowadays, and it isn't exactly what people try to do. I think if you change that for discovery, you would find a lot more engagement. And engaging with clients is what we do anyway. But engaging with them in a way that is, I guess, is a bit more person-centered. And we go up to the top, doing alongside or doing with, co-designing, co-producing. As I've said, I follow this model and I look at all steps on this model and I find these two parts, the educating and coercing, very tokenistic. We have to do some of this because it's part of the delivery. But for me personally, I always aim to look at, am I co-designing, am I co-producing, and the top will be, am I co-delivering or are we co-delivering? As I've said, I have included this in a pack that's been sent out to you along with some other things, and what I've done is I've given some examples from this organisation. For me personally, I always like to leave a presentation, a training event on one quote, and I use the same quote every time because I think that if I want to look for something, if I want to be inspired by something, co-production inspires me, but it inspires me because of this, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And for me, if you change citizens for clients, customers, service users, patients, and you change world for service, project, it still means the same thing, And for me, that's about trust. It's about taking a risk. It's about opening your doors to co-produce, because I can guarantee from what I've seen from my experiences that you take that risk and your service will improve. Thank you.